Hello my friends, welcome back. Haven't made a video on trees for a while. A few plants and flowers, but not trees. So returning again to the Irish tree alphabet, or the Druidic tree alphabet, and this video about the oak, which is a bit of a special one for me personally and many people. This is the letter for the oak in the Ogham or Ogham script. It stands for the letter D or Duir, which is exactly what it means in old and contemporary Irish. Duir, D-U-I-R, Duir. Pronunciation might be a bit off on my contemporary Irish, but yes, this is where we get the word Druid from the Proto-Indo-European word for door, and also wid, which means knowledge. So it's doorway knowledge or oak knowledge. That's literally what the word druid means. So this is obviously a very important tree for the ancient Celts and the people of these islands, Britain and Ireland. It's a very important tree across Europe. It was very important to the classical civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome. It's very important in Eastern Europe, Slavic paganism as well, and it has very similar meaning across all these different cultures. The oak is a tree of kingship. It is the king of trees. That ties into folklore very specifically in this land that I'll get to in a minute, but in terms of god associations, it's the tree of the king of the gods. It's the tree of Jupiter, who we see here. The tree of Zeus. In Irish, it will be the tree of the Doida or the Dagda, the good god. It's associated with the colour purple or blue, a royal blue, or the emperor's purple, or the blue of a summer sky. It's a solar tree. This is the main I love this particular one. It's an old friend of mine, this one. But a solar tree associated with the summer solstice. So the 21st of June or 20th of June, depending on whether it's a leap year. And the very height of the natural power of the earth. It's also associated with the eagle and the lightning bolt, just like Zeus. Thor as well is associated with this tree, also obviously associated with lightning. It's also associated with the Celtic god Taranis, the god of the chariot wheel, again a solar symbol, and lightning and weather. This is the tree of the king of the gods, of kingship, of emperors, and of a kind of kindly protective power. So that is in the Ogham, and in other folkloric associations, that is what the oak represents. Protection, kingship, healing and growth, and also not just protection in a purely martial sense, but in a loving, paternal sense. It's the tree of God. It's the tree of the Father in that sort of masculine sense. You've got to remember as well, sometimes in the modern age we think of sort of the father of the gods in a kind of cold, paternal aspect. That's much more of a sort of Saturn thing, really. Jupiter, the king of the gods, he's a good-natured guy. Jove, we call him in Old English custom, because he's jovial. He is a jolly chap. Okay, he's got blue eyes, a laughing face, kind of curly red hair, just like Thor, just like the Dagda, always laughing. This is a good-natured tree, but it's also strong and powerful. So long associated with Druidry, we see that in the Roman sources. A lot of the Druid groves were oak groves in Gaul and in Britain and Ireland too. It's got some other folkloric associations as well. One off the top of my head in terms of myth and folklore and story, there's a story called the Lindworm. That's actually a Scandinavian story, but I would guess that it came from further south in Europe originally, mainly because oaks aren't particularly common in Scandinavia. But in this story, a story of the Lindworm, the oak features a couple of times because a doorway, again door, opens, and out of the doorway of the oak comes an old woman, like a cunning woman, like a witch in the positive sense. The first time at the beginning of the story, to give some fertility magic to a queen, it goes a bit wrong and she gives birth to a monster, the lindworm of the story. And once at the end of the story, there's a forest girl walking and she has to marry this snake, and it has a habit of eating up its various lovers. And the old woman appears again out of a doorway in an oak to give some advice on how to overcome the monster, the lindworm. Spoiler alert, it's not by slaying it, it's by an act of strength and love that overcomes the monster, the worm. So in a nutshell there, we see some of the folkloric associations of the oak: strength and courage that girl had to have, but also love and kindness and compassion that is associated with this tree, and also doorways, the doorway to the spirit world, the doorway to wisdom. It's a tree of wisdom, like the wisdom of kings. So that's some of the associations of this tree. Other folkloric associations of the oak tree that you may have heard of: the oak king. So we're very much in the time of the Oak King now. The Oak King is a figure in British, but particularly English folklore, that begins to rule at winter solstice. So there's a bit of a cosmic dance happening between these two figures. One is the Oak King and the other is the Holly King. The Holly King rules over the waning year. I've spoke about the Holly King in my video about Is Santa a Magic Mushroom? I'll put a link to it here. But Santa is possibly another aspect of the Holly King, the king of winter, or the king of the waning year, to be replaced by the Oak King at winter solstice, the rebirth of the sun. Again, see the associations with Christianity and Jesus there, the rebirth of the sun on the 25th of December. But in folklore, the Oak King rules until summer solstice, when he's right at his zenith. The eagle is soaring high into his very peak. The sun is at its height in the sky, and just at that moment, boop, he's pipped. His crown is stolen, his throne is usurped by the Holly King, and then the days start getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until winter solstice, where the Oak King takes over again. So eternal cosmic battle between Oak and Holly King. We see this in another version in the Cailleach, the Queen of Winter and Bride, or Bridget, Queen of Summer and Queen of Winter. So this old motif, a very old Celtic motif, constantly being replayed in different versions, but the Oak and the Holly King feels like a more of an later English version of that. In England, there's a custom called mummers. It's a very old form of theatre where these sort of villagers would go cart from village to village and enact this kind of ancient fertility rite, really. And quite often the Oak and the Holly King are players in that, as well as a kind of crusader, and sometimes Father Christmas, and sometimes an evil Saracen. It's a bit. I don't think they include the Saracen anymore. It's a bit un-PC. But yeah, the Oak King, a very common figure in English folklore, usually in the form of the green man that we see in churches, we see over church doorways, we see him appearing in folklore, the green man. He's very often an oak, and he stands for the spirit of nature itself. Now, the oak features very, very prominently in English folklore and history, with a particular king of ours, King Charles II. This is one of these wonderful ways where sometimes history and folklore literally intersect. So if I have any viewers in Canada or the USA, we had a civil war in this country. You may know this already. Just after the time of Shakespeare, the King, Charles I, had his head cut off, and we had a republic for a short period of time, for about 30 years, ruled by Oliver Cromwell, the Lord Protector, and his gang of fun-hating religious bigots that took over the country and literally cancelled Christmas, and they were chasing after Charles II, the rightful heir, to kill him so that there could be no monarchy ever again, no resurgence of the monarchy. But the king was hidden inside an oak tree, or sometimes up in its branches, and then was whisked away to France. England had a very, very poor period where all the theatres were closed and drinking wasn't allowed, and the puritanical age. Incidentally, that's about the time of the founding of the first US colonies, and I think we still get that Puritan DNA in certain wings of the Republican Party, but I would be getting political if I said any more about that. But anyway, the monarchy was restored and King Charles returned, and so did a lot of the old customs that were built on pagan ways. So it was kind of a resurgence of a lot of the old ways that were stamped out by the Puritans. And again, a literal example of the protective powers of the oak, quite literally. There are many pubs in the UK that are still called the Green Man or the King's Head, and some of these have the head of King Charles as a green man. So this is a point in history where the actual king became the oak king. Those are some of the folkloric associations of the oak tree. A tree of courage, a tree of strength, a tree of protection, and a tree of healing and growth. If you're going to make a wand out of oak, always ask the tree, in my view, but it's best to do it when the tree is in bud at this time of year, during the waxing period of the year, so not after summer solstice. If you do it at summer solstice, then it'll be a very, very powerful item. This was cut just a few weeks ago from this tree here, so it's very special to me. In English folk custom, in fact this is probably a Celtic thing, to keep an acorn in your pocket like I have here is a part of protective magic. Also, if the tree has been struck by lightning, it's even more powerful, so the old ways say. This is particularly associated with lightning because it is often struck by lightning, this tree, and survives because it's a tough old bugger. Particularly the English oak, which this variety is. There's also European and American oaks. They're not quite as majestic in my view. There's something about the English oak that is just particularly gnarly and strong. Hence why a lot of the Royal Navy ships were made out of them back during the days of the Spanish Armada. The oak tree as well is it's one of the contenders for the world tree in world mythology, the axis mundi. It's the center of the round disc that is metaphorically understood to be the plane of reality, with an upper and lower world, you know, that triple fold world common to many shamanic cultures. It was never taken literally. The ancient people have always known the world was round. This triple division of the world is a spiritual way of understanding the world, and at the center, holding those three together, is quite often either a mountain like Mount Olympus or Mount Meru, or a tree like Yggdrasil in Norse mythology, which is either an ash or a yew tree. But in a lot of European places, I think this is the case in Eastern Europe, if anyone is watching from Eastern Europe, let me know in the comments, the world tree is an oak tree. Now that's particularly why I love this tree. I've loved this tree since I was a boy. I grew up on this farm here. This farm is round, it's circular, just like the world, and it is built on a Iron Age settlement. So when the Romans arrived, all of Britain was covered in oak forest, with just some clearings in it that the Iron Age Celts had made. And the Romans came here and they put a kiln right here, pottery kiln, which is literally right there. It was excavated last year, so maybe I'll show a video of that right now, of the Roman kiln right here. But there was already a circular enclosure here when the Romans arrived. There's been evidence of it, and this tree is right at the center of that. So this literally is the axis mundi, the center of the world for this farm. Hence this, for me, is a very, very sacred tree, and I've spent a lot of time under him. If you enjoy this content about folklore and myth and a bit of magic and a tree and plant lore from these islands, then do please like and subscribe, or follow me on Patreon. Finally, I'm going to release this video on oak Tree Day, which is the 28th of May, which is the day when Charles II was restored as monarch. And another fun little English custom for you, everyone on that day had to wear a oak branch that showed their allegiance to the king, but also the old ways. And if you're a Puritan, then you wouldn't wear an oak leaf, and maybe you would be whipped with nettles. So it was sometimes called Oak and Nettle Day. So today is the day of the oak, and if you want to do some work with the oak, then either today, between today and the summer solstice, is a great time for some oak magic. All hail the Oak King! See you soon, my friends. Take it easy.